If hyacinths and biscuits be the synthesis of poetry, it now gives me great pleasure to invite you all to a fragrant feast of poetry from Wexford and around the world. And I have a special mention to make for poet Andrea Callanan from Newfoundland. In 2015, I visited Newfoundland as part of the Ireland-Newfoundland Connections Committee and enjoyed the Festival of the Sea, which happens this year in Newfoundland, next year in Ireland. The Festival of the Sea celebrates the similarities between our two islands through music, song and dance. And since then, I have been pondering the possibility of including art and literature in that link. And I am so excited to announce that this year, through the medium of social media, that connection has been made possible. Through Kieran Dwyer of the Newfoundland Committee, we have been in contact with poet and writer Andrea Callanan, who, as part of the poetry readings coming up next, will introduce herself, her work and her Irish connection. Can I say we're delighted to have all our poets with us today, particularly delighted Andrea could join us because she is our first ever Newfoundland participant, but we're confident that she won't be our last as we plan to broaden and expand our Ireland-Newfoundland literary art connection going forward. We also hope to include a Savannah connection in that link. So stay tuned, because later in the year, perhaps we will be able to do something, an event with a poet or a writer in Savannah. But for now, sit back and enjoy hyacinths and biscuits. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrea Callanan. I'm a poet and a critic and an essayist in St. John's, Newfoundland. And I'm so delighted and so thankful to have been invited to be part of the Wexford Literary Arts Festival 2021. I'm joining you from St. John's, Newfoundland. The island of Newfoundland is the ancestral homeland of the Beothuk and Mi'kmaq, and it's also known, the island is known as Uktahumguk in the Mi'kmaq language. And Newfoundland is also the closest point in North America geographically to Ireland, which means that for centuries, Newfoundland, the capital city area in particular, and going along the southern shore of the island, which is known as the Cape Shore or the Irish Loop if you're following the highway, has been home to families from Ireland dating back centuries. And so much of our language, our figures of speech, our music, our traditions are directly rooted in Ireland, in the southeast of Ireland in particular, and in County Wexford specifically. And a lot of research has been done in the last few years on those relationships. So I'm really delighted to be able to be part of building these connections between our two parts of the world and our shared history. I'm going to read from my poetry collection called The Debt, which came out in April from Biblioasis here in Canada. It should be available online through wherever you are in the world, whichever booksellers you prefer. And I'm going to start with the opening poem in the book. I'm just looking and hoping my microphone isn't picking up motorcycle sounds from outside. Fingers crossed. It'll add ambiance. So I'm going to read a poem first. It's the opening poem in the book, and it's called Promise. And it was inspired by thinking about a particular historical figure arriving in Newfoundland or on their way to Newfoundland, only having heard good things about it. And sort of that anticipation of what this beautiful, because it is beautiful, what this wonderfully beautiful place was going to be like. So this is Promise. These are the rumors. Rapturous clash of sea stones heaving under the chill collapse and pull of tide to shore. Moss padding the shaded forest floor in deepest green, shot through with chartreuse strands, the marshes inlaid with autumn fruit. Time-carved cathedrals of cliff, congregations of gannets. How many colors pulse in a single shard of Labrador feldspar? What is the sound of 20,000 seabirds calling through silken fog? Promise me it isn't all just wild and wave-racked promise. The next poem I'm going to read was written largely at a time when my kids were much smaller, and I was spending a lot of time at a museum in my neighborhood called the Railway Coastal Museum. Newfoundland doesn't have a railway anymore. It did. It was shut down in 1989, and that was about 40 years after we joined Confederation with Canada. One of the primary reasons for joining Canada was because of our debt that we incurred putting in a railway. The other part was the debt we incurred from paying back our war debt. So, so we no longer have a railway, and I joke that my children learned about trains the same way they learned about dinosaurs, which is spending a lot of time in museums. And so this is a description of a model of the Newfoundland Railway that was in this museum. The museum is recently closed. So it's called "The Model Train is Undergoing Repairs." It's out of all proportion. Rabbits like terriers, a mud-colored pond with lily pads fixed in their chase, green marbled hole-punched discs with notches snipped like snapping mouths. Two ducks stare past a third, knocked arse over kettle, head and wing resting on the cloudy surface, unruffled. The steps to the general store's covered porch hover, knee-high, impossible, while a woman in a drop-waist dress juts her hip, lifts her hand, motions to no one. The power lines across the dam have snapped, catgut dragging despite all signs of hot glue intervention. On a piece of ice like a wadded napkin, two miniature seals recline, no larger than the seagull lighting on the teal epoxy harbor. In the train yard, well-dressed wives tilt stiff against a car, aquarium gravel rubble around their feet. I'll read one last one. This is called Anniversary. We fell in love, and I had to get used to a new kind of speaking in plural. That spring, all the maples were late with their leaves, or so it seemed. Gray in May and a risk of snow. We'd go to work, and you'd send a dispatch for each patch of sunlight that appeared in your office, and I'd do the same from mine. Thinking of you, thinking of me, of your face turned to the bright sky for the moment that it brightened. The moments of brightness were few, but still we knew the sun was coming. This spring, even if it should come late, we'll measure squares of sunlight on the floor and drop the kids at school and lock the door. That first night, you held my hand against your buttoned shirt, and we grinned until our faces hurt. We stayed that way until the sky turned light. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Steve Dennehan. This is Robin Dennehan, my daughter. I'm not much of a reader, I'm a terrible reader, so I thought I'd read the poems to Robin instead of directly to this camera because it's slightly less scary. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this poem is a poem that came third last year in the contest. Anyway, it's a very long title because I always write long titles, and it's called Snowflakes in the Long Grass, the last letter from Sylvia Welter to J.D. Salinger. Alright, so you know J.D. Salinger?
Yeah.
He wrote
I forget.
a book called The Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a great writer, and you'll read loads of books over your time in school and stuff, and they'll all be written by these great writers, and they're all going to be terrible. But this guy, he wrote from his stomach and his heart, and everything was full of character and personality. But he himself is a bit of an oddball. And Sylvia Welter, this lady who wrote to him, he married her. He was a soldier, an American soldier, and he went and fought in the war, and he fought against the Nazis. You know the Nazis?
Yeah.
Not great.
No.
But the Nazis hated Jews.
Yeah.
Sylvia Welter was a Nazi, and he was a Jew, and they fell in love and got married. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. So he came home, brought her home to America, and she wasn't a fan, or sorry, his family weren't a fan of her, with her being a Nazi and stuff. So it didn't work out, and she continued to write to him for years and years. And this poem is about what happened to the letters she used to send him. Okay, all right, I'll read it super fast because it's not that short. Okay, I watched you through the gap in the curtains, standing beside the car, holding a letter. You looked unsure. It scared me. You stood so still, tall and greying, still. The sky was white. You shook your head against it, ripped the letter in half again, and again, and again. When you flung it upward, I lost it for a moment, white on white. I felt cold, watched the pieces fall as snowflakes, landing in our long grass. You were quiet when you came inside, even when I smiled my best smile. Later, I snuck outside in my nightdress, my bare feet wet from the dew-damp grass. A charge in the evening air, I looked for snowflakes. As my eyes adjusted, they appeared to me, all through our long grass. I picked up 3 softening pieces, put them up my sleeve before a gunshot. Your voice ringing from the doorway, rolling down and through the Cornish hills. The handwriting was spindly, broken spider's legs said, only when I was with you, think of me, Sylvia Welter. I dared to ask. You looked at me, furious, amazed, told me that you hadn't opened the letter, told me that she was nobody. The next morning I looked through the gap in the curtains. The snowflakes were gone. What do you reckon? That's written from the eyes of his daughter, who found this letter. She never knew that there was, that really happened, kind of. Anyway, that's it. What do you think?
It's a lovely poem. Yeah.
Boom. All right.
I love it.
That's okay. This is the second poem. It's a poem called Breath, and actually, yeah, I don't know why I'm reading this poem. It didn't come. It didn't. I don't think I even entered in the competition, ever. But anyway, it's a poem I thought was all right, and it's written about you. Dun, dun, dun. Do you remember this poem?
Well, I just read it there.
Well then.
Yeah. I remember
Okay.
it.
All right. It's called Breath, and it says, the wind came like a flood. Our home creaked in pained resistance, and we, together on the couch, trembling, smiling in the stretched atmosphere. Do you want to read this bit? Actually, look, that's you there, and that's me when I'm. Go ahead, you go.
Let's go out, Dad.
It might be too dangerous.
It won't.
You might get blown away.
I won't. I'm a big girl now.
Yeah. We stood in the warm winds, leaned into them, and felt unseen hands hold us, press our clothes against us. We looked up to see holes torn in the sky, layers of clouds moving in parallax, swirling greys and whites, and underneath it all,
Let's play tag.
yeah, and between the winds we were running. I could hear laughter cut through the howling. I could feel her gaining, catching me already. I struggled up another gear and pulled away, for now, at least. Lying on the trampoline, squeaking springs, groaning trees, dancing leaves, holding hands.
Can we play again, Dad?
For the first time, I say it. I am my father. I say it in all this air. Just let me get my breath back. All right, to that. Okay, the third thing we'll do is Robin's going to read a poem. It's a poem. I should have got to read one of yours actually.
I don't mind.
Yeah, well, this one's teeny weeny anyway. So this is a poem written a few years ago maybe, and it's teeny weeny, so it's easy to read. So go.
Pooling. She bites into the sun and blinding eyes runs from her mouth.
No.
And blinding light runs from her mouth, pooling at her feet. She licks her lips and leaves us all in darkness.
Yeah. How about that? Do you understand it?
No.
Me neither. Let's go.
Blank canvas. The hardest thing, I always think, is making that first move, seizing the moment of the mood. For blank stands the canvas, yearning for the beat of colour, that signal of intent. Imagine you're behind a microphone and must sing that opening phrase unrehearsed, or slide into the trombone blow, but then you know it can only be in blue. So you stand at the crossroads, palette winking paint. Every wodge represents a go. Now dare you be a Daniel? Go on, improvise, extemporize. Oh, just get on with it. Aim the gun and shoot. With that first precision dab, you make your mark. Select your ground. All things stem from that one shape. Now burdened with destiny, that little dot of paint is a challenge to the pristine whiteness, urging its response. But this attack is just too tentative, too subdued. And then you see in your mind's eye how other artists painted with such relish. How then to emulate the lunge and plunge of Pollock, or slash and parry of other paintbrush swordsmen? No, re-begin with swash and buckle gusto, shouting now, take that, you snivelling canvas, splash into the turpentine, wallop into the globs of paint, frantic flourish on the palette, and then fierce stabs of colour on the wretched cowering surface. The spell is broken, sickly inhibitions roll away. You grab the biggest brush and fall upon the easel with a blind and berserk fury. Breathless, you stop to view the carnival of carnage, to inspect your desecration. But now a new, more subtle force has come upon you. This won't do, you say. Change gear, select another mood, more serene. Call it indigo. Picasso would have approved. So you slop and prod with bristle brush, and shapes take form like burnt sienna blushings you may see in the fresh-cut section of a tree. Then your mind begins to wander, straying into strange places like, why do women hug cushions? I tried once and felt a fool, so I placed it behind my head and slept instead. Now the moving, moody brush has fashioned you a smiling face. A young girl, you think. You're Mona Lisa, who just knows that bilateral symmetry is so boring.
Hello, this is Eamon Wall from St. Louis, Missouri, a proud Enniscorthy native, sending best wishes to everybody and the best of luck for the Wexford Literary Festival 2021. And I have a little poem to read for you about an American road trip, Rock Island. The road along the river sways to Rock Island. The towns pass through along the way to Rock Island, sing in the slow registers that never asked to be remembered. Though diction sweetened on the breeze and rhymes folded, find favor with honeysuckle and fleur-de-lis. And like a woman finger-picking an old guitar, waves pucker along the Mississippi. Traffic crosses from Hannibal into Illinois. We motor north through Canton and Palmyra, Fort Madison, Burlington. Highway 61 divides its city limits, links up again on the northern sides. The children read names with such precision, it seems each place name is now a legend raised on a Roman scroll. Cities then drop like moisture, dried from asphalt after furious thunderstorms. I pick Americana to play when their voices fade to the rhythm of the ride. Is it right to think the gifted left Keokuk while shut-in citizens settled in for Friday fish fries at St. Joseph's and bowling bingo Saturday nights at 8? In a far field, I take heed of beds of grasses bowed near the trunk of a cottonwood. Are we too far to the east on the tall grass prairie, for a sight of the little blue stem of the lowest hills. Remember that road trip I call out above the music, but my family is asleep. I am quite alone, no longer careful. So I cry to the wrenching lyrics, a loved man among strangers. South of Muscatine, soft lines of light are crossed by the flight of water. I grew up tight in a river town where the narrow streets ran serpentine to the Slaney. Rock Island, 30 miles. Thank you and good luck.
Aesop by Derek Sullen. This is a poem from my collection, The Other Guernica, and it's inspired by a painting by Velázquez of his conception of Aesop, which I can show you. And when I saw this painting, what strikes me is the humanism and the sympathy of the face. That face, you had to invent it. A gaunt arrangement of bone and muscle, someone who knows the quirks of pride and greed. A man as near anonymous as it's possible to be, lending his vagrant name to others, authoring tales long after he is dead. A jobbing storyteller, a fabled fabulist, with a biography that begins in the slave quarters and ends at the bottom of a cliff. By the threshold of power, leaning slightly back in wry appraisal, in the atrium of a global bank, or the hallway of a parliament, he sees the fox and cockerel in us. Betty Fox is Skipping by Derek Sullen. Betty Fox is skipping on 18 inches of perch, 20 stories above the buzz and dystopia of the street. The rope skims her head, heels skim the rope, toes touch down and rebound. Perhaps she'd rather this than the blindfold waltz or the famous death whirl. Indianapolis to Miami, Depression to Cold War, her crowds gasp. She springs high, does mid-sky splits, angel in an ice-blonde wig. The name is leased. Decades of nimble women renew Betty Fox, aerialist. Dapper but grey, Benny debuts the latest. She clamps her thighs on his waist and leans out into the swallowing air, closing her blue eyes as if she sleeps. He sees all the Bettys, ghosts of one another, slipping from him as he begins to spin, as he begins to spin.
Layla by Derek Sullen. My father said I'd be a good wife, and I would have been but for the poet. I was young and flattered, with no defences against the words that spun me into their song. Out of the dark of our yard at night came his wailing chant. It was a voice that pursued and possessed. Even our dog sat and listened in a circle. He woke the house, crazy curs, madman stalker. By day he led a hermit life, lurking in the desert and in our minds. My husband fettered me with suspicion. Now that my illness brews, the poet sings of a heart that ails. My thoughts reach out across the sands. Let me be. A tumour kills me, not passion. But more night lyrics blossom. I sweat my sickbed black and close my ears. He wants to heal me with kisses, or else immortalize my dying. Two men's fantasies pinion me as my husband hovers, watcher at the pillow, alert for my death. I think he needs to hear firsthand whether it's his name or the poet's that's last out of my lips. Layla, I shall howl, claiming back my stolen soul.
Not My Michael Fury by A.M. Cousins. While the girls watched the boys kick a ball on a scuffed patch of earth behind the school, I hid in the prefab hut that served as library and refuge to the bashful. There was shelter among chipboard shelves where books offered solace to a child weary of feigning interest in the chatter of fashion and elusive boyfriends. Here were English girls learning life lessons in progressive boarding schools, young women in the chalet novels bravely dodge Nazis, and Miss Hare's Regency heroines, all sprigged muslin and beribboned bonnets, were tastefully romanced by young books, with checkered pasts and endless supplies of starched cravats, who drove fast phaetons and could tame a giddy young filly with one smouldering, masterful glance. Sometimes I saw a boy near the crime shelf, barely 13, fingers and teeth nicotined as a man's. Once we talked, and he held out his yellow hands to show their tremor. He suffered with the nerves. He liked a thriller, a mystery to solve. Poirot was the best. I preferred Miss Marple's investigations among the murdering genteel class. If I'd ever thought of him after that, I would have imagined him on his tractor, the cab filled with smoke as he turned the sod in neat lines on his father's beet field. Some years later, my mother wrote me the priest had called his name at Mass, requested prayers for his soul's repose. She heard the talk at the chapel gate. He was found in the barn. No mystery how his life of hardship came to an end. He was not my Michael Fury, never my tender young love, but I think of him in a makeshift library long ago, wits pitted against a fictional detective and a small shy girl for company. Redress, and this is from my collection of poetry of the same name. Redress. After reading In Praise of Shadows by Junichiro Tanizaki. Give us this day your problems. Allow us to torment ourselves about shadow and beauty and good taste, and we'll swap all that we've got for 1 hour in the life of a tortured artiste who wants to sit in a fancy lave and listen to a mosquito. We'd leave the shadows to the banshee and the puka and the nun who died young. She lurks and snaps bony fingers as your backside hangs through a hole in the bench, and you tilt forward to tear a scrap of newspaper. All useless decoration stripped in Sunday's well, where little Nellie dances for holy God. Artane boys march, and Heeny's henhouse child views the moon through a chink in a plank. Ancient Magdalenes and crones, sister stitchers with blackened teeth and white pinched faces glowing over modest grey kimonos, enhance heaven's cloth. embroider Limerick lace. Give us this day.
Hi, my name is David Butler, and I'm absolutely delighted to have been asked to read from the Empty House anthology from Dura Press for Wexford Literary Festival. I'm no stranger to Wexford Literary Festival. I've been down several times now, having been shortlisted over the years for the Billy Roach, the Anthony Cronin, and the Colm Tóibín. So there we go. A little word about myself. I'm a novelist. I have 4 novels at present in print. Short story writer. My second short story collection is due out from Arnon House. And I'm a poet. My 3rd collection from Dura Press, Liffey Sequence, is due out this September. And I'll be reading a poem from that. Now, I'm absolutely delighted, as I said, to have been asked to read from Empty House. Empty House is an anthology, really an environmental. It's addressing the whole issue of climate change. And Alice Kinsella and Nessa O'Mahony, who edited, asked a number of writers across the genre to contribute. My contribution is in the form of a poem, and I'll begin by reading that. It's entitled Gorse Fire, and it occurs in the autumn section of the collection. That said, it's from a slightly longer poem called Weather Gods. So with your indulgence, I'd prefer to read the whole of Weather Gods to give it a piece of context. Weather Gods itself is published by Writers Rebel and will be appearing in my collection, Liffey Sequence. Weather Gods. Tired of burnings, bulldozers, charred lungs, Shak the rain god decamps from Mayan rainforests, rides the bloated trade winds, comes to reign over the old world. Days on end, the swollen earth has swallowed till it's soft as blotting paper. The sun is an aspirin dissolving in a gauze of soaked cotton. Storm drains clog, rivers turn reptilian, shed their alluvial taint in basements, swell to bursting. Silver plate the floodplains. Shak moves over the face of the waters, looks on desolation wrought by man, calls up the brother elements. Part 2. The drunken wind which last night stomped through the playground drove the park into a frenzy of soughing boughs, buffeted the houses, sputtered down the throats of chimneys, chased cascades of startled leaves against the windows, has, this morning, taken a breather. The ground is littered with all the detritus of late autumn, as if a carnival has decamped. On the trees, stripped bare, as parents when grief tears through them, are suddenly old. Part 3. There's a moment between drought and downpour, when the winds hold their breath, the boughs stop moving, the cloud, backlit, is photographed still, the sea's meniscus, reverent. A moment in suspense. An instant when future imperfect appears to hang in the balance, when the dice have yet to fall, the first fat drops to explode in the dust-tormented earth. And part 4, which is the part that appears on its own in Empty House. Weeks on, the scorched stench persists. Beyond the cowering heather, the rusted fern and bracken's burnt sienna, a blackened heath. Something else subsists beneath the ocean sibilance and gulls' psychotic squabbles, the absolute silence of death. Bitterness of ash, the whitened cans, the charred bones of gorse imploring like something from Purgatorio, an image out of Aleppo, or a lesson from our own past, the whole head hitch-capped. Now, there are a couple of poems that I'd really like to read from the Empty House anthology to give a flavour of the sort of contributions. The first is a gorgeous poem by Victoria Kennefic, thinking about her young child, and it's called On Being Two in the Anthropocene. I am a sea, and you are a bird. You're not a baby, but a big girl holding my face in your soft little claws. You are lark, and you are singing hello. Mama and Baba are big girl, rocking like we used to. You were a bird, a baby bird, all cozy, only to leap off my lap nest and blow kisses to house spiders. I am not scared of them, you say. I am not scared of them either, I parrot. I think that's what you're supposed to do, echo them. We like spiders, I say. They live with us. I have diligently shown you their webs, hugging corners of cloudy windows. Beyond, our little thumbprint of garden lies unmowed. It is the bugs' house. We must squash them, you say. And butterflies, why do they wear makeup, Mama? I am conscious then of my face, of what I hide with my face. All summer your chubby cheeks are slicked white with sunscreen. There's your hat tossed like a petal on the grass. The neighbours pass. We explain our untented plot is intentional. They smile tightly and nod. We tell the caretaker to skip our patch. I still run after you, pick things up. When you nap, I watch the snip, snip, snip. When you don't, we walk slow loops around the wetlands. I get sad when they cut the grass, you pipe up, your hand glued to mine. I do too, I say. That is a magpie, one for sorrow, always wave it away. You are tired, I carry you. I imitate lark sounds, it is not enough. The nests are empty. I get sad when hedgerows are ripped out like insulation from a rotting house. I get sad as earth becomes sea. I get sad that in showing you this sinking world, I am teaching you how to say goodbye to it. And then the other poem I'd like to read is by Podrick Regan, and it's called A Forest in the Czech Republic. Where fungus doesn't knit itself into the mulch or cluster on the roots like scabs. For I am not, and not writing this, for I do not hear the wind carve through the spaces the trees don't occupy. Where a hole chiseled in a trunk does not resemble the hole in a guitar. Where snow is not falling, and snow is not resisting its effacement in the streams where no boys are swimming, and the nymphs of no mayflies build their adult selves. Where God is, where branches run like cracks through the pink sky, dividing it according to their own bent logic. Where the long vacated shells of chestnuts would catch the rain if it rained. Where rain would shatter the surface of the streams where some boys swam some time ago. This isn't hypothetical. And I thought I'd finish up with one of the poems from my forthcoming collection, Liffey Sequence. And in fact, it's this poem that was shortlisted a couple of years ago for the Anthony Cronin Award down in Wexford. So I think it's appropriate. It's entitled Dockers 1930. First light, the descent from the tenements. Flat caps and donkey jackets, shoulders hunched against an easterly would skin you. Keen-eyed, skinned, eager for the scrimmage about the rough pulpit to catch the reed, the foreman meting out work who works, who idles. A hard graft for the chosen. Scant light aslant through moiling dust inside the dusky hold of a collier, where rope-muscled calloused hands, rough-handled shovel hafts, scraping, angling, hacking irascible black-flecked phlegm, until, begrimed in pantomime blackface, they emerge to carry their thirst as a wage and pay out the bitter tithe, the matchboxed shilling that buys the wink and nod. It's that or starve. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute honor. Thank you.